happy to have you. We're an artist collective. I think we usually have about 24 members, and it takes all of us to put on two-person shows. Our programming is about 22 months, and this is the third show of this programming season. So this show is The Circle in the Circle with my co-artist Sherry Tseng. And our title of our show is, did I say Circle? Yeah, our show is A Circle in the Circle. It's inspired by a movie, The City and the City. It's a novel, it's a science fiction, it's a murder where two communities live in the same space, and they're trained to not see each other. They're conditioned to not see. So I'm not going to tell you why we selected it and what we're doing with that title. I'm hoping that you'll come to your own conclusions. But I'll start with, so we're standing in 600 square feet of sod, which also means we are standing in what takes 2 trillion gallons of water a year. And I'll let you think about that, and then also think about AI data centers use 17.5 billion gallons of water a year. So this takes 100 times more water, the American dream. And now I will introduce our speaker, Weston Twardoski. And so I'll get it right. Dr. Weston Twardoski is Associate Director of the Center for Environmental Studies at Rice, where he studies artists and resilience practitioners in community-led urban adaptation. He has written extensively about Hurricane Harvey, disaster recovery in Houston and New Orleans, and also he is a theater guy, so he is an artist. And when we three thought about the show, that to have him come talk was a real coup. You've done other talks here as well in January. But so, yeah, Weston.
Thanks so much. I'm delighted to be in conversation with you three and get to think through this really exciting series of pieces and the ideas that you're trying to get at, which is really, I want to go back to the title for this, which I did write down, Wildlife as Technology, Living Systems in the City. And I think Houston is a really fascinating place to focus on these ideas. It is a city that is, and I heard you mention this, Pete, but also I think every conservation person I know in the city will quickly jump to tell you, we're the most biodiverse city in the country. And that comes from a couple of things. Like that comes first and foremost from the nexus point of different kind of ecotypes. So the city itself is just incredibly naturally diverse. When you're 10,000 square miles of the greater Houston region, that does give us a leg up. We're a very large place, but we're also an incredibly a diverse place in terms of who lives here, and particularly an immigrant-heavy city. For a long time, we have been the #1 houser of refugees in the country. And so we bring in people from across the world who often literally bring in seeds and crops and plants with them, which contributes to this really kind of fascinating microcosm we've considered here. And when we think of Houston, that's probably not what we immediately think of. I think it's easy to just visualize Houston as pavement, and we have a lot of pavement, and that's causes issues that we can chat through. But I think this kind of provocation to understand actually how does nature and infrastructure exist in the same place, how do these things entangle with one another, is really, really fascinating. So I'm delighted to get to kind of talk through that as it comes out in some of this work, and also you're thinking more broadly. Cindee, I want to highlight, just as we walk in on this sod, this was alive like 4 weeks ago when I came here, which was really fun. At the opening, and my immediate thought was like, how long is this going to go before it goes totally brown? And I think that's a really, for anybody who's been able to come multiple times throughout the life cycle of this exhibition, that's a really powerful way to kind of walk into the space. So do you want to just start and talk a little bit about how this piece emerges from a broader kind of body of work thinking about the actual tangible nature that you're playing with as an artist?
Well, our lawns are where most of us come into contact with nature on a daily basis. That's our contact now. But really, our lawns are no longer nature. It's really an environmental deficit. Our natural landscape, where the coastal prairie is native plants that support all kinds of wildlife, and primarily the coastal prairie, it functions as basically an upside-down rainforest, sequestering carbon and soaking up rainwater. So that is what our landscape is supposed to do. It's supposed to be filled with wildlife and function as a sponge. But the sponge is broken, and when it is a sponge, then you have this difference in temperatures of surfaces. And when you have a difference in surface temperature, you have a different pressure in different areas, and landscape moves across the landscape. Water moves across the landscape. When everything is just a heat dome, it stays, and then you get rain for 5 days and homes that flood. So to me, it's a really easy fix to change the way we landscape. And if you look at other cities, I travel often to Minneapolis, I was just in Austin, a lot of cities are doing it. I'm doing it in my own yard, I'm doing my 5th living sculpture. Sherry can talk about how she does it as well. And so I come to really the lawn, not from where I've been transitioning lawn so much, more I've been transitioning flower beds, because socially we have a hard time leaving the lawn. And it's, you can't make everybody change everything at one time. So I've started with like flower beds, and I'm slowly expanding flower beds into lawns. And what my dream is that every lawn will be looking like a flower bed. Unless you need it to be a soccer field. You know, there's a balance. I'm for soccer. I'm for sports. I'm for walking comfortably and not worrying. But I'm also for, I've met children who've never seen a butterfly. Their first butterflies have been in my gardens, and their brain, early childhood development needs nature to develop. So the lawns is an easy place to start. To me, it's an easy place to start.
I think it's essential too. I mean, it's, you know, it's the most irrigated crop in America. It's 40 million acres dedicated to lawn space, which is by far the largest crop that we're growing.
Yeah. Of all of the irrigated crops together, it's still more water.
Yeah. And it doesn't even get into things, you know, if we think about the issues, this is like one of my little bugaboo favorite facts, but it's just, we think of mowing the lawn as the most normal thing in the world, and 45 minutes of mowing along the gas mower is 300 miles of your car. And so from an air pollution standpoint, I mean, I have friends who've done better mapping on that. It's kind of hard to guess how many lawnmowers exactly are in the city, but you know, it becomes very quickly, you could get 100,000 lawnmowers off the street. You're talking about something like the equivalent of 300,000 cars you've just taken off in terms of air pollution.
Yeah, I've read like 11 times the gas emissions of a new car.
Yeah.
And also to fill the tanks of the, have you ever read this? The EPA reports that to fill the tanks of these lawnmowers and edgers and those types of things, the spillage annually is the same as Valdez spill. Jeez. Right?
But you know,
It's the EPA who said that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's spillage, it's air pollutants, it's in your backyard too. You know, I mean, it's in your front yard, and it's like your kids run around right next to a lawnmower, right by it, and it's like from a human health standpoint, like lawns are this kind of deceptive area that, you know, we think of as the most normal and familiar space. And Sherry, I'd love to hear a little bit from you too, because it's this very Western notion. I mean, it's incredibly Eurocentric, this idea of a giant lawn as being an attractive need. And so I'd love, because I know you do exciting things with your garden and space, and I'd love to hear about how you're thinking about that.
I'm not that black and white in just saying that I'm opposed to lawns, in that there are different grasses that you can grow than, growing St. Augustine, that you have to water and mow. I have a little patch of zoysia grass, which is shade tolerant, drought tolerant, never ever watered it. And it grows, like it doesn't grow very high, but lawns to me also have been kind of a problem in that it stands, it's a symbol, right? It's a symbol of our society. It was used as a symbol of imperial colonialism throughout the world. And lawn started as this patch of grass in the Middle Ages where they planted vegetables and flowers and let the animals graze and the chickens graze, but then it evolved into, if you have money as a symbol of your status, of your elitism in Europe, especially in England, that's you have a lawn to say, well, we have this patch of green grass that is not necessarily functioning, that we have it because we can have it. So it just kind of evolved into, nowadays, in the West, it's a symbol of this, at first it was the elite class, and then now it's the middle class, and now it's spread into our suburbs. Like, you go out to the sprawl in Houston, every house has the lawn, 2 trees, lawn, 2 trees. I mean, it's just, like, you've achieved your dreams if you could have that. So I feel like changing minds is changing the concept of what is aesthetically beautiful and what is necessary and what functioning grass or lawns or forests do. That's kind of like my approach, my thoughts about having lawns or no lawns.
We're in a moment too where it's, there was a kind of a series of headlines last week, and I think just kind of correlating to spring taking off in places of the country that are not, deep south and been since February. But there was like a large gathering in Illinois where every year they have a native plant sale, and they're kind of like, we normally have like 1,000 people that show up for this big native plant sale. And they're like, we for the last 2 years have had over 6,000 people show up. And there's just an awareness, and some of that I think is exactly what you're hinting at with a cultural change that's taking place. It's very much aesthetic. I definitely want to think about the aesthetics with you all on this, because HOAs really care about aesthetics. Like, this is a real condition.
Yeah.
And changing what is aesthetically normal and acceptable takes time and effort. And I think actually having artists in that space is really critical to say there's beauty here. There are ways of seeing this. But the other flip side is like, it is getting harder everywhere with climate change just to keep things alive in the ground. And increasingly, I think many gardeners are just, and homeowners and whatever, are kind of sitting there going, what is going to give me the least trouble? Because if we are going to go through 6 months of drought, I don't want to have to water my lawn for that whole period. I don't want to have to deal with the maintenance of it. And I'd be curious to hear something from you, because you've got this incredible garden project you've been growing.
So the other part of heat is the planet mitigates heat with water. But the water has to function in the system that the planet has created, which is the water soaks into the ground, the sun comes up, heats the ground, the plants pull the water out, transpire, go up, take bacteria that maybe birds and bugs have left in the leaves, that little bacteria goes up with the water, it gets cold, and then it rains back down, and it cools. When we no longer try to soak the water into our landscape, either we're rushing it off our turf grass, and then we solar heat it with whatever chemicals we use to make it look perfect, on the asphalt, and that hot water with chemicals in it, then we put it in the concrete bayous where it stays hot, and then we put it in the Gulf of Mexico. it's getting warm. It's getting so warm. I've talked to people in the UK who are having tropical plants grow on the north side of there, which is kind of crazy, right? But that these little things that we all do in our yards are keeping it warm. And it's these little things that we all do that can help cool it. And I 100% agree with Sherry. I think that what we think of as beauty has become, I mean, we're a visual animal. That is our strongest sense. And so we're a really young species. We talk about this a lot. We're a very young species, and I think we have the right, and we're going to be screwing up and not being the best species yet, but I think that we're smart, we have a conscience, and we will get it right at some point. But really the true beauty of something is not what it looks like. It's not the perfect green color, it's like what that lawn does. It's that interaction, what other species does that support. And when you start seeing things in that way of what beauty is, how things act and how they treat others, that changes society. That changes everything. So to me, it is the beginning of not just environmental change, it's the beginning of cultural change.
Pete, do you want to talk a little bit about the project that you and Cindee have been working on? And I think that's kind of a nice segue into actually how you're thinking about this, not just from the aesthetic point of view, but also like the kind of communicative and the discovery point of view of rethinking where we live and how we're interacting with nature.
For sure, for sure. I guess I'll start off with my background. I work in enterprise software, so I am very privy to the process of working in a bunch of teams and making software to make money. So when I visited Cindee's studio, I saw that she essentially reworked the front lawn of her studio to be reverted back to native plants. And as I was standing on there, I noticed that it was 5 degrees cooler than the surrounding neighborhood of it. So coming from a software guy, seeing the systematic change that this artist has already implemented on her property, it got me thinking of what can we do to make the city of Houston cooler and also address the problem of flooding, because we are a coastal plain, yet we flood pretty horrifically here. So we're working on a new platform called the Living Systems Initiative, which is to help make everything related to the ecological industry more accessible and more discoverable for the general public.
Can you say more about how that works and what you two are trying to do in terms of actually discovering some of these things?
So Houston itself, we have a very diverse group of scientists, of artists, of educators, of environmental groups. But the issue is being able to discover those organizations and those events too. So the Living Systems is aiming to make that more discoverable and encourage more participation and more inclusivity within Houston, so that we can have more engagement with what we have currently in Houston. I think you touched on it earlier, Houston being one of the most biodiverse cities in the U.S. We have bayous, we have wetlands, we have migration corridors that go straight through Houston. Yet none of this comes top of mind when you think of Houston. So this platform is meant to make all those things, from the exhibits to the bayou tours to expeditions, more accessible, more discoverable through the marriage of both art and tech.
Sure, you have a background in architecture, and I think that's this place that, as we think about bringing people into these spaces, but also how we build that infrastructure. I think there's a lot of, usually when we think of like technology, when we think of even just like human existence and nature, it's very easy to go to like the negative in a relationship of pollution, right? And it's an easy place to kind of jump to. But at all times, we're interacting with nature. Like we're making spaces that we are on top of nature, with nature, trying to keep it at bay, maybe trying to invite it in. But it's really about how are we framing these interactions? Are we trying to be in partnership with nature? Are we trying to master nature. I mean, this is kind of, it's funny to see like from the civil engineer side, where for a long time conversation has been, we have to stop flooding and prevent flooding. So in the last 20 or 30 years, there's been this real, water exists in all kinds of places. Places are going to flood. We want to control how that happens. We want to not imagine we can just stop it, but rather we want to think about, where should we put that water? Where can we live with it where it's not hurting people's homes, but rather, is going into a retention ditch that could maybe actually be a pond, which could maybe actually be a park and an ecosystem. And so it's a kind of mind shift. But I'd love to hear, from coming out of architecture where you have to think about environmental conditions so much with building into your art practice. How are those two things connected?
So, so building code dictates a lot of what we have to do. You have to have a certain amount of permeability, only a certain amount of concrete, and the building code has been changing for a long time. And it's moving towards definitely a more ecological sensitive set of rules. My own house is sort of an experiment. We actually have a little, what we call weed wetland, and it's, call me cheap or lazy, I don't know which one, or both. So we actually dug a pond in the yard towards the back, so we don't have to put in these pipes to carry water to the street. So we have an area where we have sloped our yards to it so that it's holding water for a little while. It does not have mosquitoes, believe it or not, because that's the first thing people ask. What about mosquito? Well, it drains down into it. And my wildflower patch and my little pocket prairie also, in one of them we did in German it's called hugelkultur, and I don't know if anyone knows what hugelkultur is.
Gardening nerds in the room.
So what they did was that they pile rotting wood and twigs and leaves in the middle of, say this is your garden, in the middle of it, and then pile dirt on top, and it would eventually sort of decrease in mass, but it holds water as well. So instead of doing kind of like I looked through several pictures. I thought that looks like a tomb, right, in a graveyard. So instead of building up, we dug down. So we had a couple of trees that died. So that's where we put the big logs. And it's been maybe 8 years. So there's a little tiny pond that also holds water, but only for like 2 minutes. So it's I don't know eventually what we'll need to do, but it's a work in progress. It's learning. It's learning about how water behaves, how it interacts with the plants I have there, what plants work in that area, or what plants don't. So those are the kind of things I'm doing in my own yard. But speaking of like flooding and all that stuff. So Houston is a concrete jungle, right? You won't disagree with that. I don't know how many of you heard about the satellite image NOAA 2 days ago. You did, where the freeways,
Yeah.
the clouds have gathered above the freeways. So in the image, you're just seeing these clouds that have this, spine. It was fascinating, right? At first I didn't know why. But I think they've decided that maybe the heat island effect, the heat island that you had talked about, concrete is a heat island, that it reflects heat. So what happened was the moisture gathered, because of the heat, the moisture gathered there and then rose and became cumulus clouds.
Whoa.
And if it's too much, guess what? It'll
It
rain.
rains.
Yeah.
Only over the highway.
Only over the highway.
Over the highway.
Isn't that a weird thing? That is so weird. Even the picture, the image of the cloud just over the highways was just bizarre. And that's what we're doing with these concrete highways and cars. And
I love that you highlight the learning aspect of this. One, because I think there's something hilarious to the idea of civil engineers learning they're creating heat islands that are causing cumulus clouds.
Yeah, the civil engineers are.
I don't think anybody knew that going in.
Well, they also come in our bayou system back in the 40s.
Oh, the paving over the, yeah, absolutely.
Right, and we're learning.
But also the learning in your own backyard. And I think that's actually one of the places where artists and scientists are most connected. And I mean, Cindee, I know your practice, you were so research oriented.
Yeah.
You do so much research. And I'm curious, across the three of you actually, how experimentation kind of factors in. Because I think, I think I've given away, like, I also enjoy gardening. I'm a novice gardener, so I'm bowing in deference here. But I mean, it's one of the places that I think for most people, if you're going to be able to experiment regularly, I mean, maybe not frame it that way, but it's like, I'm gonna throw these flowers here and see what happens. And over time, you kind of go like, oh, I think I understand why this didn't work or why this did so well, and I can learn something from that. And I think that's the space that, artists, I know in my practice, experimentation, trying things, seeing what works, what doesn't is so vital. And I think that's an area that we actually have these really interesting overlaps. Do you want to jump in?
I'm so excited to talk. So I'm doing living sculpture number 5 right now. And number 4, a year ago in November. And I didn't have really enough time to spend with number 4. So it kind of got out of control. So it did what it wanted to do. And I'm a Labrador person, and number 4 is at my own residence. And it was blocking these windows where my dogs look out. And I was like, oh, I gotta get those butter daisies down so the dogs can look out. My husband said, well, you might want to look outside first. And monarchs are an endangered species. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of monarchs clear across the front of my property for 2 days. And they weren't anywhere else in the area that I walked 2 miles every morning and 2 miles every night, and I didn't see anywhere else. So that was, it's so hard to let go, and I was forced to, which was a real blessing for me. But the other thing is that the living sculpture I'm doing right now, that the documentation is in the back, and it's 5,000 square feet. It's a lot for me to handle, and I can kind of only do so much. And the soil is super compressed. I can barely dig a hole there, so it's really hard. And unfortunately, I can't bring bison. That would restore it really quickly, but I don't have that happening right now. But what has happened, I seeded. That's cheaper and that's easier. I don't have to dig a hole for that. I'm a big part of it. And just kind of sat back to watch. And there's so much amazing information with technology right now about plants. And a lot of the plants that, out of these 25 pounds of seeds, think how many millions of seeds that is, that chose to thrive that year were remediating arsenic and lead, which is amazing. Like there's this plan, this natural intelligence that we don't have a clue about. And when we sit back and watch it, and the better science and technology gets, we're starting to learn. There's people doing scientific experiments with the intelligence of plants right now. It's really cool things are really happening. We're really living an amazing time for change. And I think a big part of that is AI and technology happens fast, where I talk a lot with politicians, our local government people about I drive down my studio street and they're mowing down the wildflowers and we're struggling with biodiversity and like, why is this happening? And they'll tell you, Cindee, change in politics is slow. I'm like, well, why? Because technology, it doesn't have to be. Maybe you should move over and let some people who want to make change fast come in. So it's really exciting. I mean, I think we live in an amazing time. I'm really jealous of the young people that get to see this through. And the future is really bright.
100%. I think like we, growing up, like from my point of view as a millennial, growing up with manicured lawns, you come to accept that it's just a thing, right? Everywhere you go, you will see a manicured lawn. But once you see pieces like Cindee's and Sherry's of, wait a minute, these lawns also take much more water than data centers do. You begin to realize that, well, why are we doing the societally acceptable thing of having a lawn when it doesn't make sense? You have to pay for maintenance, there's lawn mowing too, and also it's not solving the issue of like heat and flooding too. And going back to what Cindee mentioned about technology, now we have mountains of data of how to grow vegetation, impacts of it on the native wildlife and temperature and precipitation too. Now with that more accessible, we can use that to educate and hopefully drive societal change towards restoration, towards native wildlife. And the goal being that let's make it cooler in terms of temperature, but also in like, cool factor, but cooler, and also let's make it more sustainable for life moving forward.
But can I ask a question?
Please.
So, how do you guys feel about, because I have been thinking that this climate change is, we're all privileged, right? It's a problem that the privileged are trying to solve. But like for you, with technology and it disseminating information, how do you feel about people that are poor or low information? How do we connect? More with people that are not like us, who cannot afford to buy electric mowers, or who need the job to mow the grass, or they're just all kinds of social questions in my mind that are more difficult than just saying we should do this, we should do that, we should do this. What are your thoughts?
I'm glad you asked that. It's a really important question. I think that's where art comes in, because with art, you give the invitation, you help establish the emotional connection to the topic at hand with art. So, like, consider a photograph, right? If I show you a photograph of like a prairie you drive past every day, now as you drive past it, you will recognize it. Or a sculpture. A sculpture can show the relationship between X and Y, just through the visual representation of it. So I think with art, it helps address the issue of distribution and accessibility, because art is the most accessible thing. You can show it and distribute it in multiple ways. And the baseline result is the emotional connection coming from the art. With the connection established, then you can use that as a driver for interest, for further education, and the end game, which is behavioral and societal change.
Jesse, you want to jump in?
Well, I have a push lawnmower.
Very good.
Mine's Fisker, like the scissors, so I'm a really good chopper.
Those things are really hard to use.
Well, I mean, the first time I was like so pumped up, and so I was like mowing my lawn and trying to, at the same time, hurt my shoulder.
Oh.
And also forgot to hit record. Just hit record. I mean, I think really doing things simpler is much cheaper.
Yes.
But the city doesn't always allow people to do things, and that's a problem. That when city policy keeps us from being healthier, that's a problem. And that's fixable, but we have to demand that. We have to ask for that. That's not just gonna happen. We're not gonna make changes without, change is driven by people. And so we have to drive that change. But I think the big thing that's missing in cultural change with the environment is we have a connection to a little bit of nature, a little bit, but we have lost our connection to animals and what is real food. And if I've spent a lot of time visiting different regenerative ranches, you can, what would take 100 years to regenerate a desertified landscape from probably overgrazing, from when fences came in and we got rid of predators. When you bring animals back and allow them to do what they do naturally, which is to eat the plants and poop 40 pounds of manure, and then put however many ounces of nitrogen in it and spread the seeds from their coats, you bring back within, I've seen one to 200,000 acres outside of Austin, in 3 years go from the dirt like outside in the flower bed, in 3 years grasses waist high, and birds come back that other ranchers and farmers in the area hadn't seen in 100 years. Like you can go from 8 species of birds when they start, and in 6 years have 20 species of birds. And you have to have that animal impact, that waste. But we don't do it here, and it's hard for us to envision, but if you're in Mexico or if you're in Europe, you'll see herds of goats across the street. And you can bring animals in, let them eat your grass, poop in your yard, and then you use that to raise your food, and then you get food that has 75% more nutrition in it than the food that you're buying at the grocery store right now. So it's really easy to bring the economic scale up when you do things, when you start looking at natural systems.
I think it's really interesting. I think, one, I really appreciate you bringing in the reality that for climate change, the most impacted people are the most impoverished people. You know, I'll highlight, we're on the Gulf Coast. We are at really the epicenter of environmental injustice in the country, kind of here between Baton Rouge and New Orleans is this beltway of just, we are in the thick of it when it comes to a myriad of different challenges, and poverty absolutely maps on it across that, as does race. And understanding like who the most vulnerable communities are and what needs to be done to ensure that we're trying to protect and help people is really critical and really hard. And really hard also and I mean, this is where it gets into, and I mean, so maybe just looking at this, piece of art, money and mulch kind of mixed together. I mean, it's really hard in a place like Houston where the economy is so tied to these industries that are simultaneously killing us. And to go to a person who's like, the only way I can put food on my table, for my kids is working at a petrochemical plant, even though I know that's going to give me cancer.
Yeah, I know people like that.
Yeah, these are real and thorny issues. And I think, what excites me about the conversation we're having, but also this work, is it's also this invitation to, you said simpler a minute ago, which I love, because I'm like, there are places in life that we absolutely can be simpler, and there are places in life where we need to run towards technology, and like trying to exist with both of those in simultaneity is important. It's actually something we talked about at Heather and Henry's show a couple of months ago that you had mentioned, where, I think I can speak for everyone in the room that we're pretty happy we probably can turn lights on, that we, have cooking surfaces in our home that are safe and secure and easy to use. Like, technology has done wonders. We really want to go dark for a second, I apologize. A weird party game some friends and I invented a few years ago was, if we didn't have modern medical technology, when would you have died? 9 people in the room, nobody made it past 30. I mean, it's really, you start sitting there and it's like the miracle of these things. It's even simple things we think about. Single-use plastics, oh, terrible, get rid of them. You probably like having clean blood bags at the hospital. Like, that is a single-use plastic we actually really, really need. And so these things are interwoven, and I think it calls for us to think really deeply about what are the places we really don't need something, and we can be simple. We can move towards an older way of going about it, where this is an approach we know. And when you were talking earlier about even like remediating soil with plants, I'm kind of laughing in my head because I'm like, part of this almost sounds like traditional ecological knowledge, which comes out of indigenous folks, but it's not, because 100 years ago we didn't have the kind of chemical pollutants that we do now. Like, it's actually too new of a problem to be relying on like 3,000-year-old knowledge to solve. It's something we've had to learn, and it can be tied to those practices. It can be connected to older knowledge forms, and we still need new science to tell us hey, this is actually really working to remediate that arsenic. Actually, this approach is really effective. It may be a simple approach, but it's working wonders. And I think that's where there's these interesting kind of nexus points. And I think that's something that, even the name of the show, where we're thinking about like, how do we see the things we're not seeing? How do we shift that frame where we almost double vision into the other world that might be, or that we ignore, which we know, when like, oh, the petrochemical belt is so far away, I never even think of it when I'm in Houston, but I go to New Orleans and it's right there, and I'm like, you have not driven on the East End in a hot minute then, because like, you just like, you have to drive 30 minutes out of New Orleans to see any of this stuff. Like, I drive over to the East End and I'm like, that's the Beltway, it's right there. And so, and part of that is Houston's big, and it's easy to ignore parts of town that we're not in all the time, but it's right here. And so, yeah, maybe to that point, I'd love to hear, and then I'm actually going to pass it off to folks out here because I've been talking for a long time. But yeah, so I'm cueing you now. If you have questions, be thinking of those. But I'd love to hear a little bit about, from both of you, I think, part of it you're also interested in, Cindee, is ecotourism. And I think that's part of this project, is very much like, how do we bring people into places to get them to see these other sides of Houston? Can you talk a little bit about the ways you're thinking of trying to maybe reintroduce natives to the place that they're living here in town, but also for outsiders who are coming into Houston who do just think of us as the concrete jungle that it's so easy to do? How are you trying to reshape how we experience what this place is?
Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
Okay. Thinking through the answer. For ecotourism, we've talked a lot about like deep societal systematic change. And the beginning of it is to, how do you make people care? And once you start that with art, right? With the interest, that's the invite. With technology, you use that as a tool to drive more accessibility, more inclusivity, more participation. Once more people are inside the city, seeing the beauties of the city that we have to offer, from the Gulf to the prairies to the wetlands. The idea there is to raise the level of the general public awareness of what we live in right now. Because for Houston itself, right, before we made it a city, it was a functioning ecosystem. We had soil that was permeable, that can take in the water, drain it, and then give life to a life cycle of plants, animals, and maintain itself. But with the introduction of our city, we've essentially caused our own problems. We've talked a little bit about the highway thing, right? We made highways, and now it only rains on the highways versus raining on our wetlands. So with the introduction of living systems, once there's more public awareness and participation within the local ecological vendors within the city, the idea is to then push the restoration of the city to further grow the ecotourism side of Houston.
So when you talk to people about ecotourism, I learned over, I think this idea came to me, I think it was 2022, and I kept like, I would talk to someone and then I would hear them give back to me what they think I'm talking about. I'm like, dang, I'm using the wrong words. I'm like, not getting this across. And when I talk about ecotourism, it's not a million people fly down here and we have a wildflower festival and we sell a lot of beer and have all those kind of things happen. I think we start elevating. So if you're interested in birds, this is one of the places you come in the United States. But we've not had to elevate that bird watching industry here because we haven't needed to, because we've had the oil industry, the medical industry, and our sports. But we now need to for ecological reasons, and we are one of the most biodiverse environmentally with birds and butterflies. Like there's 500 species of butterflies that are native to this area. I don't remember how many birds. It's pretty amazing. The wildlife here. During COVID, I did a lot of reading, and I remember reading was one thing that really got me inspired about Houston as a place to heal the planet. Is we are semi-tropical, the best cities for staying in biodiversity are the tropical cities, but they're too poor, is what the environmental writers write. Well, okay, so we're not tropical, but we're semi-tropical, and we are not poor, and we are huge. We have lots of land. Our inner city is 600 square miles. That's a whole lot of turf to start soaking up water and supporting biodiversity. So that to me is supporting those things. And then the reason I like ecotourism is the economic system is the system that drives Homo sapien. And you don't have to teach Homo sapien how to love plants and biodiversity if they find they can make money from it. So all you have to do is educate that. And if we can get these developers to see that if they put in front of their hotels native plants that attract monarchs, and somebody's coming to town to go to the Texas football game, and they find they can bring their family and then go to a hummingbird tagging event with their kids, or ride the bayous on their bikes, and then they'll want to stay at this hotel that's also supporting this environmental thing. We can be a city of not just the oil industry, we can really be a city of the true energy of the planet. So one of my favorite writers is a Native American writer, Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she'll tell you, and Native Americans often found that the solution was found near the wound. And I see the industry that Houston has as pretty much a wound, but I also see that we can be, I mean, we have this diverse population from all over the world. We have this diverse animals, wildlife, plants, and when things start changing here, this network that we have, this living system spreads from this wherever your other families are from. You can tell these stories. And so I see Houston as a real gem, and I don't think it'll take that much time. I met with Houston First, they're the people that market the city, and what they told me was, wow, yes, we can do that, but we don't have the manpower to go out and gather their information. And when Tammy came to my studio, and I'm like, Tammy, you're young, you know people, I need someone to do this. And that's how we got introduced, really. So that's what he's doing, is creating this umbrella of these natural systems, whether it's the bees or the butterflies or the birds or the plants. And it can go so broad. But, so technology really, and we haven't really talked about this, but Sherry and I have talked a lot, and I think early on we were kind of bonded with this idea that technology is not necessarily the villain. We socially villainize technology right now. But when you look at the water usage of our lawns compared to, that's 100 times more than data centers, but we hate data centers, and it's better than lawns. What's wrong with us? But and one more thing, just one more quick thing. So if you take it, there's like and we talk about people with less money. The new data center in Georgia, that's getting a lot of talk because Alexandra Cortez took 2 ground bottles of water, right? And they're, I don't know how many feet away, this family from this data center. So like, what's wrong with that? But what people don't talk about is that data center brings in some good things to that community, jobs. They're paying, I think, $30 million a year into that community. But what matters is what happens with that money. And I often talk about we need to live like the bison lives, in regeneration. And I know that many people know what I'm talking about when I say that, but I can see how data centers can be like a bison. So if you're having a data center that uses, I think it's 500 million gallons of water a year, to recoup that with a lawn with 1% organic matter, it only takes 25 acres to recoup 1 year. Now, I know that all the water that goes into that doesn't just go up and rain back down there. It's a much more complicated system than that. But I'm an artist, and I'm just bringing up these questions, and I know enough about numbers to know that there's a possibility there. The data center can't just take from this community. The data center has to give back. And their use of water can actually bring more water if they put the right landscape in to this community in Georgia, which suffers because they only get their water from rainwater. They don't have an aquifer. But technology has the ability to find out where's the best places to put these landscapes to build aquifers.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it's kind of simple. When you break it down and you get accessible.
It starts with the interest. It starts with the interest of grabbing the impression from their technologies used to educate and shepherd them in. And the funny thing about humans is that like we're emotional, right? We protect what we love. And that's what art does. It creates that love for the topic at hand, and then it drives the stewardship. So everything we talked about today, you can see that it influences each other. It's kind of like a circle, right? We make these lawns, we get a flooding problem, we make more highways, and now it's hot, and then we just keep doing that over and over and over again. And with the introduction of AI, right, like yes, it's a very scary time, but also it's a time too where we can really push radical change. What if we use AI to make good tech? What if we use it to educate people on the environment around us, what is working in the past, and how can we take our existing data and use it to restore to something better versus just driving more revenue for whatever company does what, right?
You mentioned about like loving something, and Robert Louv, you read Robert Louv, he says, if you don't know something, you can't, if you don't know it, you don't love it. And so a lot of the work that I've been doing lately is to help people see things so they'll fall in love with it, which is really what you're doing with the technology, is providing a way. Because when you live in a city, it's hard to fall in love with a sandhill crane or, a bison. But through technology, we can get a little closer and then hopefully get people to go out more when they come to the cities.
My hope for the project is that I hope that, yes, this works, but I hope more projects come out that are mission driven and that we leverage the innovation from other industries, tech, medicine, oil and gas, and we use that to perpetuate something that helps bring the quality of life for the society around us too.
I really would like to learn more about the overlap in systems thinking from an art perspective and then technology. Is there a relationship? And can you elaborate on that some more?
Well, for me, systems thinking is, it's a way of life. Pretty much everything I do, I don't really see in silos. And I don't really know why that is. Maybe because I have weird auditory processing issues and my brain makes multiple connections that other brains don't really make. So it's really easy for me to all of a sudden see all these connections. I think it depends on your industry. If you're a scientist and you work in a lab and you work with bacteria, it's hard for you to see in a system. And I think that's part of the problem we have with education right now is we're a very specialized society, which is important. You learn a lot when you can specialize. But if you don't ever take, the problem we've had with soil is they only studied soil in the laboratory. By the time they got the soil to the laboratory, it was dead. And so, to me, it's just a way of being.
Yeah.
For me, my interest, right, is in the border area where systems, the edge of the two, different systems or different between humans and animals or between technology and humans. It's, you could have beautiful collaborative relationships or you can have wars. from an artistic point of view, that's my interest in exploring what happens on that knife's edge. And just a bunch of questions, and how can we, or do we want control moving it one way or the other, or is that natural? I'm thinking of the Chernobyl and Fukushima power plant, and it's been, I think, I don't remember how many years it's been for either one, but Chernobyl was happened a long time ago, and both places are having a great, the animals are flourishing, the plants are flourishing, but it's not due to the, and the technology. It's not due to bioremediation plants. They're experimenting with sunflowers or different mushrooms to, soak up the radionuclides. But it's due to those areas being exclusion zones. They're separated, so I'm interested in this separation, porosity, how much both sides come together or go about. When I read that, it's due to those places being exclusion zones from human poaching, hunting, messing around, or farming, messing around with the animals, with the plants. That's interesting to me, right? It's the degree. And city design, urban design, how do we approach a utopian society where everybody, including the animals and technology and plants, can flourish? I don't know.
I love that you refer to that as the knife's edge too, because you bring up utopia, but the other end is dystopia. And I think actually what I'm hearing a lot in this, and something that I find really exciting from the kind of technologist perspective, is something of a call for humility. And as you mentioned, these mushrooms that are forming that are eating some of that, which is not responsible for the landscape around, but we have discovered in these disasters, these unexpected things that materialize. We could say the same about bacteria that eat plastic in places that we're we didn't expect to find this, but we created this problem. And that's not there's always a magical solution. There's not. But it is a little bit of a call towards this. You don't know what the unknown is when you haven't done this. And just bearing that in mind, remembering, you can build the most effective system for transporting goods in the world, and then COVID comes along. And suddenly it's congrats, you have removed every barrier, you made such an effective system, you have destroyed everything when the unknown materializes. And we know there will be unknowns. That is a given condition of life. And I think it's an incredibly useful place for artists to remind thinkers, technologists, the folks who are architecting our futures, right, is a little bit of humility goes a long way.
We don't know. We think we're smart, but we're not.
It's the human aspect of things. That's what we're trying to remind ourselves too. I want to call it for systems thinking. It pulls from a body of knowledge called design thinking. And this was started back at Stanford about 30 years ago. They originally called this human-centric thinking. And essentially the idea was, let's make a framework that we can use to solve complex problems. How do we solve complex problems? We take inventory of the components, we understand their interactions with each other individually and how they interact with each other together in the system as a whole. So if you take this can be applied to anywhere, for software, right? If I'm making an app, I need to figure out the database. I need to figure out for this screen how, if I push this button, what does it do? That's a system right there. For an artist, it's, I have this medium, I have these materials, I have these concepts, I have these topics I want to touch. How do I cultivate that onto the medium that I'm using? So I see systems thinking, design thinking, connective tissue for almost everything, tech to art.
It's everything.
Yes, and
It's everything.
what we're talking about today too, right? The lawn, right? The lawn's a very simple thing, but it's, as we touched on, it causes a lot of issues. So
Connected to everything.
We are technically at time, so I'm sure folks would welcome more questions if you want to come up to the panelists and chat with them, but maybe we can thank everyone for a wonderful discussion.
Thank Sherry. We have one more week of this show, and this is her last show with Through Line, so we're very grateful to have had her here. And the questions that she has asked, it's certainly been a learning experience for me to work with her. We've met for about 9 months. We met about once a week and just talked about the environment, and so we wish her well.
Thank you.
I also want to take some time to thank Weston for being
Oh,
here
yeah.
today. Thank you so much, Weston, for everything.
And Pete.
Thanks for coming. Please enjoy the show.